season.
We are waiting for Senator Bernie Sanders to release 10 years of his tax returns, and the Democratic nominee is calling on President Trump to follow his lead. Press Secretary Sarah Sanders had a message about that on Sunday for House Democrats.
This is all about political partisanship. This is a dangerous, dangerous road. And frankly, Chris, I don't think Congress, particularly not this group of congressmen and women, are smart enough to look through the thousands of pages that I would assume that President Trump's taxes will be.
Well, Mattie Duppler is senior fellow at the National Taxpayers Union. How you doing, Mattie? And good morning.
I'm good, Bill. Happy Tax Day.
Happy Tax Day. You beat me to it. Thank you for being here. What do you think we learn in Bernie Sanders? What do we learn about him, do you think?
Well, I think we learn everything we already know, which is that capitalism, the system that Bernie Sanders continues to vilify, has made Bernie Sanders a very rich man. Now, I want to go back to Sarah's comment real quick. We know the real reason that congressional Democrats are pursuing the president's tax returns. It's because the progressive agenda has no hope of making its way through Congress. The Senate, of course, smacked down the Green New Deal. House Democrats can't even get a budget done. This means that progressives and socialists who are running for president, like Bernie Sanders, have very little to show the base as they head into that election season.
Okay.
So that means that the tax returns are what they're pursuing.
That may or may not be correct, but do you think they'll succeed? I think is the fundamental question for the law at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's obvious that what they're doing is they're setting up a very long court challenge. So they don't need to succeed. They just need to keep this in the media narrative. It's something that they want to continue to talk about because they think it gets their base excited. I don't think they care whether or not they get the tax returns. They just care if it's part of the media cycle.
Here's Larry Kudlow. He was out a bit earlier today on Fox. So was Steve Mnuchin. But here's Kudlow from Washington. Watch.
The president not releasing his tax forms today. One thing I want to say is echo the Secretary of the Treasury, my good friend Steve Mnuchin. This administration has no intention to weaponize the IRS the way the Nixon administration did. I'll leave it there and refer you to the Treasury Secretary.
Yes, Steve Mnuchin basically said the same thing a bit earlier. Go ahead, Mattie.
Yeah, and I think that that's a good point that Kudlow is making there. Remember that Ways and Means said they want the tax returns because they want to make sure that the audit procedures that the IRS follows are all on the straight and narrow. There are a lot of lawyers at the IRS who can make that determination. There's an inspector general who can make that determination. Giving that information over to a political panel at the Ways and Means would open up a large can of worms that we wouldn't necessarily be able to undo.
Okay, well, just so our viewers know, you're seeing Joint Base Andrews there outside of Washington, D.C. President's now arriving with his motorcade. He's going to take off Air Force One bound for Minnesota. We're going to watch that departure. We'll follow that trip throughout the day. He may have some comments here, Mattie, so we'll see whether or not that happens here. Get back to the law here. 1924, I think the law states shall furnish.
Mm-hmm. And shall, of course. Sorry, Bill.
Does that hold up against the challenge? If the law states shall furnish, how can you deny Chairman Neal?
Well, because shall is kind of a tricky word when it comes to legalese, right? It means that that may be the case that the IRS or the Treasury has to furnish this information. I think the question, of course, is whether or not that Democrats on the panel are trying to use this for political means. It seems obvious that if they're saying that they need this information in order to make sure that audit protocols are being followed at the IRS, this information isn't necessary for them to understand that. They should have asked the IRS commissioner when he was up on the Hill whether or not those audit protocols are being followed. Instead, they've decided to grandstand on their tax returns themselves, and that information, I think, is going to not be provided to them in a timely manner.
Okay, just waiting for a comment here. It doesn't look like it's going to happen. So, no, it's a beautiful plane, isn't it, Mattie?
Of course it is.
Air Force One off to Minnesota. One more comment. Let's bring it back to Bernie Sanders. He said the following. He said, my view has always been that we need a progressive tax system that demands that the wealthiest people in this country finally start paying their fair share of taxes. If I make a lot of money, you make a lot of money. That is what I believe, end quote. I expect we'll hear more of that tonight from the town hall in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I certainly think we'll hear more of that from Bernie Sanders. The amazing thing to me is that this town hall, the release of Bernie Sanders' tax returns is all happening on tax day, which, of course, this is the first time Americans are filing their taxes under the new tax code thanks to tax reform and President Trump. 80% of Americans got a tax cut under that code. The tax code actually got more progressive because of the loss of deductions for higher income earners. And Bernie Sanders was the one who was leading the chorus, saying that this was a giveaway for corporations and wealthy individuals rather than what it was, which was a huge tax cut for the average American family. He should certainly be asked about that later this evening.
Let the debate continue. Mattie Duppler, thanks for coming in. Happy Tax Day.
Thank you, Bill.
4:15. Thank you for your time. Here's Sandra.
And on to this, the woman caught faking her way into Mar-a-Lago due in court as questions